The plan to cheat failed! Molly watched from the front door of the mansion as her husband Philip got into his Jaguar XJ. She waved and sent him an air kiss. Philip smiled and waved back before pulling out of the driveway and heading to the airport for his flight to New York. Molly leaned contentedly against the door jamb and enjoyed the South Florida morning. It was still cool, but soon the heat would begin to build. Their small front yard was ablaze with lantana and penta, and two gorgeous bougainvilleas framed the front door and small porch. The air was saturated with their floral scent, and butterflies flew from flower to flower. Molly was a red-haired 30-something beauty with an outgoing personality and a fiery independent streak. She was an editor at a publishing house working primarily with authors of love stories and other fiction geared toward female tastes. With the advent of modern electronics, it became advantageous to work from home, so she turned the second bedroom of their townhouse into a very functional office. Philip and Molly had been married for 7 years. Philip was 19 years older than Molly. Her family and friends had been stunned by the age difference when they married. But as Molly explained to her younger sister and select friends, the advantage of older men was that they were patient, consummate lovers who knew how to pleasure a woman, unlike some of the young bulls her age she had slept with. After all, everyone knows you drink aged wine, not new wine, because old wine tasted so much better and richer. It also didn't hurt that Philippe was rich, very rich. Philip was originally from North America, and of course was educated at Harvard. He had increased the family fortune through his highly successful international electronics company. Molly was not a dowry hunter, but still a girl should be aware of any silver linings that potential suitors might bring down the aisle. Molly had come to South Florida from the poor coal country of Kentucky in search of an education and opportunities that weren't available back home. She found both. Philip had seen a gorgeous young woman serving tables at a nightclub while she was completing her graduate studies in English at a local university. Inexplicably, he was struck by Cupid's arrow, and they were soon married. So in the end, Molly was a happily married young woman who was well-groomed and pampered, pursuing a career she enjoyed. In late winter and spring, the couple lived in Florida in their townhouse. In the height of summer and fall through New Year's Day, they lived in their main and much larger home near Highlands in the mountains of North Carolina. It was a true mansion with several year-round servants and all the trappings of truly wealthy people. The townhouse in South Florida was their private retreat for just the two of them. Philip's business often required 1 or 2 trips a month, usually lasting 3 to 5 days, sometimes more. This was no burden to Molly, as she had a job, several hobbies, and was an avid fitness enthusiast. In addition, the townhouse was only 2 blocks from the beach, and there was also a coastal strip of upscale stores, restaurants, bars, and nightclubs with various entertainment venues within a half-mile. She and Philip frequented there often, and when he was away, she didn't hesitate to visit either. After all, she was a grown-up modern woman. Molly watched her husband disappear on the way to the airport. He was a good man and a wonderful husband. She, in turn, had been a devoted and faithful wife. Well, perhaps that's a bit of an exaggeration. She was indeed very devoted to Philip, and they made a great couple. But she was also a bright, young, and very sexy woman with an older husband of a different generation. This combination sometimes led to unpleasant complications. 3 or 4 years ago, Molly had begun to succumb to the siren song of carnal temptation in Philip's absence. Perhaps she'd lost her way once or twice over the years. No, that wasn't quite right either. Perhaps it was more than that. Let's just say that she was a friendly woman of easy character with a healthy carnal appetite, and we'll call it a day. In times past, the husband had full ownership of his wife and her precious physical assets. In today's world, a husband's rights to his wife's physical assets are more like a lease agreement than a purchase agreement. Consequently, when the tenant, the husband in this case, is unable to use said premises, it makes sense for the landlord, the wife in this case, to sublet her assets to another man in the absence of the primary tenant. In this case, Molly's extramarital actions can be viewed as those of a prudent businesswoman maximizing the return and use of her valuable carnal assets, which are in significant demand on the open market. In the end, Molly was simply a spoiled young woman fooling around from time to time for fun and excitement, but without serious intentions. Philip was a cosmopolitan, highly educated socialite with brilliant business acumen. He was a convinced realist and had no illusions. He knew that men would propose to his sexy young wife as soon as he turned his back. And his young wife would be heavily seduced by young guys her age. How could it be otherwise? It is an ancient tale, often told in literature and played out in life. Philip thought he had a Ferrari as a wife. Such a treasure had no value locked away in a garage. Sometimes the Ferrari has to be allowed to race frantically on the open roads. If one wants to enjoy driving such a magnificent piece of physical art, he must also accept that there may be speeding tickets along the way. Philip was tolerant of his young wife's potential sins. They had no explicit agreement, but he was thoughtful in his actions and she was restrained. Philip kept his wife aware of his schedule and was careful not to show up home unexpectedly. Most importantly, he kept his nose out of other people's business. Molly, for the most part, limited her flirtations to times when he was traveling. Such dates also tended to be limited to their time in South Florida. There in North Carolina, there were servants and too many friends and relatives to be promiscuous without causing a public scandal. But here in South Florida, they were far from their usual social environment, and the area was flooded with vacationers and snowbirds fleeing the winter weather. In this anonymous mass, prey was plentiful and easy for someone as young as Molly. Molly shifted her gaze to the street, toward the beach. Andre was walking at a brisk pace just in time. He was a slender, dark-haired, cheerful man about her age. She waved enthusiastically and smiled happily. Andre waved back. Andre had asked Molly to dance at a nightclub last year, and one thing had quickly led to another. He was Parisian and obviously wealthy, as he took a month's vacation every spring to vacation in South Florida. He had a large beach house a few blocks from Molly's townhouse, and they met there periodically when Philippe was out of town. But today, Andre had come to see her, eager to renew their stormy acquaintance of the past year. He had arrived only yesterday, and when he called shortly after his arrival, he was overjoyed to hear that her husband was leaving this morning. A shiver of excitement ran through Molly's body. Well, you know what they say about French lovers. She could vouch that their reputation was well-deserved. Molly was imbued with the exotic, dark allure of a foreign lover, like the love affairs she edited. His sexy, accented English simply turned her to mush. Sex with her husband was wonderful. Sex with Andre was the spicy, forbidden lust of the unknown and dangerous. When Andre stepped onto the porch, Molly reached out, pulled him inside, and closed the door. She wrapped her arms around him and smothered him in a deep kiss. Andre responded to her passion. Molly broke the kiss, turned, and panting with anticipation, dragged Andre up the stairs to the family bedroom. As they entered the bedroom, Molly began to remove his clothes. He returned the favor. The naked couple quickly made their way to the bed. It was an antique iron bed, high enough so that Molly had to take a short leap to sit on the edge. Then there were footsteps on the stairs, and a fateful call. "Darling?" With her attention distracted by Andre's concerns, Molly didn't hear her husband's car pull up, the automatic lock on the car door jingle, and the front door open. The worst moment of the adulterous rendezvous had arrived. The unsuspecting husband suddenly appeared on the scene. Andre's head flew up, eyes widened with alarm. From Molly's vantage point, looking down at him, Andre looked like a frightened groundhog that had crawled out of its burrow to look at some unexpected danger. The impending catastrophe of her husband's imminent arrival at the love show precluded any delay. Otherwise, Molly would have shuddered with laughter at the sight of Andre between her thighs, looking around in horror. Andre hissed, "Your husband!" simultaneously, with Molly's hiss. "My husband!" "Honey, the airline sent word that my flight has been canceled. I will take a later flight." The couple jumped out of bed. They heard Philip's slow footsteps as he walked up the stairs. It was the thud of doom, approaching step by step. Andre grabbed Molly's hand and whispered hysterically, "My God, what are we going to do?" Andre was terrified. Molly thought there was reason to be. A cheating husband, upon discovering an intruder in his wife's bed, often reacts quite violently with anger, usually directed at the intruder. Philip's muscular and athletic physique was part of her attraction to him. At one time, Philippe had even been a moderately successful heavyweight in the Harvard Boxing Club. Andre was more of an intellectual type, inclined toward poetry and art rather than sports. If it came to conflict, there could hardly be any doubt about the outcome, despite their different ages. There was little choice: accept and surrender to Philippe's mercy or hide Andre. Molly feverishly assessed the deteriorating situation like a general on the battlefield, holding back a catastrophic rout. Philip was too close for Andre to make a stealthy run to her office in the second bedroom. Both the closet and the bathroom would provide initial cover, but there was no hiding place inside if Philippe happened to look in there. The antique bed, on the other hand, had at least 30 inches of clearance, and the quilt hung almost to the floor. Molly nudged Andre toward the bed and hissed insistently, "Get in deep and lie still no matter what happens." Andre didn't hesitate. He threw himself on the floor. There was a thud as Andre's head hit the lower iron handrail. Andre hummed, stopped, and grabbed his forehead. Molly put her foot on Andre's bare ass, pushing him forward, and whispered desperately, "For God's sake, hurry up!" Andre redoubled his efforts, reaching under the bed. The last thing Molly saw was his shuffling feet desperately pushing his bare buttocks and legs under the bed. My God, this is turning into a vaudeville farce, or one of Shakespeare's convoluted comedies, she thought. Molly smoothed out the blanket where they had crumpled the surface a moment before. Jumping off the bed, she raked up their discarded clothes and shoes, which piled on the bedroom floor. Molly rushed into the bathroom and stuffed everything into the dirty clothes hamper. She hummed, "I'm in the bath, darling, I'm running a bath." With those words, Molly turned the tub faucet. She was a versatile girl and occasionally enjoyed a sensual vacation by reading novels. That, at least, was a plausible explanation for her nakedness. Molly hurried back and looked around the bedroom for any compromising evidence that might alert her husband to the presence of an intruder. That was it. One of Andre's shoes fell out of her collection of discarded clothes. Molly had been a great soccer player in high school, and with a kick of her foot she threw the shoe under the bed. In desperation, she may have put too much humph into the kick, and a startled grunt came from under the bed. Approaching the bedroom door, outwardly calm, Molly feigned a smile and asked, "What did you say happened to your flight? Anything wrong, dear?" Philip walked through the bedroom door. His large, muscular figure, clad in a strict Brioni suit, radiated an air of competence and masculinity. "Oh, yes, this is the man I married, and for good reason," Molly reminded herself. "Oh, no, it's all right. The airline texted me halfway to the airport that my flight was canceled and I've been rebooked on a later flight. I sent it to you." Philip froze, staring at the sudden vision of his beautiful naked wife looking up at him with her brilliant brown eyes sparkling with mirth. Perhaps that spark was fear or excitement rather than amusement, or perhaps it was a combination of all three. I wasn't expecting such a nice welcome home. As I was saying, I sent you a message that I was coming home and suggested that you have a cup of coffee with one of those lovely blueberry muffins you made this morning." Among her many talents, Molly was also a skilled cook. She enjoyed preparing meals and culinary delights for Philip. Molly assumed a defiant pose, jutting out her hip and brazenly sliding her hand up her thigh. "Ah, I left my phone downstairs and didn't see the message. Well, I was going to get a good soak before I started my editorial work." She continued to tease. "I suppose I could be persuaded to put it off for coffee and muffins with my husband." Molly turned and retreated into the bathroom, closing the faucet. She shouted over her shoulder, "And what time do you have, darling?" As Molly reached for the robe hanging on the bathroom door, two muscular arms wrapped around her and effortlessly pulled her off the ground. Philip carried his struggling and laughing wife to the bed, where he laid her face down on the blanket. He held her there with one hand, pulling off her clothes while she playfully tried to escape. After all, she had no desire to actually evade what was about to happen. Philip said with a laugh, "You little varmint! Long enough to have a quickie with his wife and then have coffee and muffins with her?" Panic-stricken Andre lay motionless face down under the bed. His forehead throbbed where his head had hit the headboard, and his face burned where Molly had kicked him with her shoe. He forced himself to lie as still as a corpse. He had seen Philip with Molly several times in the past year. He had not the slightest desire to come face to face with the big man whose wife he had so thoroughly screwed over last year and had just tried to repeat. Andre suspected that such a confrontation would not end well for him. Andre could hear everything that was being said between wife and husband and watch what was happening. Well, he could watch what was happening on the floor. He heard Molly land over him on the bed and saw her husband's clothes cascade to the floor and be tossed aside. Andre had Molly's engine running on all cylinders before her husband had even arrived. Now she was heated and hyped up. The bed began to heave rhythmically, accompanied by Molly's steady, happy sighs that Andre knew so well from last year. As the pace quickened, Andre began to fear that the 200-year-old cast-iron bed frame would undergo a brittle fatigue fracture and leave him trapped beneath the springs, mattress, and energetic bodies. The bed shuddered, creaked, and groaned as if it were having a nervous breakdown. Finally, Philip let out a bull roar, raising himself on tiptoe, and Molly's legs disappeared from Andre's sight. The gasping couple crouched on the edge of the bed, catching their breath. Molly exhaled. "Oh, my God. I'm so glad the plane was canceled." Andre, relieved that the bed frame had withstood the dynamic load of the couple's love fest, watched the ankles head for the bathroom. Molly nudged Philip in the direction of the shower and ordered, "Quickly shower, get dressed, and come back. I'll make some fresh coffee and heat up some muffins." Molly grabbed her robe from the back of the bathroom door and put it on. She sent an air kiss to her husband as he showered and then returned to the bedroom. Molly tiptoed over to the bed and knelt down to look under it. She covered her mouth with her hand to suppress a laugh. A naked Andre lay motionless right underneath where her husband had just turned off her light. The ridiculous irony of the situation tickled Molly's funny side. A nasty yellow and blue scar had formed on Andre's forehead from the bed frame, and his right eye had begun to blacken from the impact of the boot. "Oh, you poor thing," Molly exclaimed quietly. She put her finger to her lips and whispered, "Shh, don't move. The floors creak. He will hear you. I'll come for you when it's clean." Andre nodded, letting her know he understood. Molly got up, collected Felipe's clothes from the floor and took them to the bathroom. Then she went downstairs. A few minutes later, Philip got out of the shower, got dressed, and went downstairs as well. Andre remained as still as a church mouse. He had not the slightest desire to face Philippe in his home den. As he became more and more tense, lying motionless in his cramped shelter, Andre could hear Molly's pleasantly melodic voice and the richer tones of Philippe's voice, interspersed with light laughter as the pair enjoyed coffee and scones. The close-knit couple sat directly below where the wife's distraught and battered lover was hiding. Finally, Molly glanced at her watch and exclaimed, "Honey, that was great, but if you're going to catch your plane, You need to hit the road. Philip grumbled. You're right, it really was great, but I have to go. The couple kissed warmly at the door, and Molly watched her delightful husband leave for the second time that morning. As Molly turned to go up the stairs, her phone on the table by the door jingled with an incoming message. There were two messages from Philip. The old one about the canceled flight and his return home, and the new one that had just arrived. Thanks for the beautiful morning. Don't have too much fun today without me. And a winking, smiley face. Molly sat down on the steps with an enigmatic smile, looking thoughtfully at the message. Andre was still being a good boy and hiding under the bed, waiting for her to release him. He could wait a little longer. She needed to think about it. Did Philip somehow know about Andre? The mention of tonight's fun and the winking face made her wonder. But it could also be completely innocent. It was unclear how Philip could have guessed Andre's presence. But she also knew that Philippe was a sharp spice. He would put Sherlock Holmes to shame. Had he deliberately taken his wife over her lover, just for fun? Or out of spite? Or was it just an accident? Who knows what conclusions Philip, with his brilliant mind, might draw about today. Molly often wondered if her husband suspected or guessed about her sloppy, casual forays outside the marital boundaries. She certainly appreciated his apparent tolerance and indulgence of her sins, and tried to keep it a secret so as not to embarrass her husband. For several minutes, Molly sat on the stairs in deep thoughtfulness. Philip was indeed one of those one-in-a-million husbands. He was much older, and there were pros and cons to having such a husband. In Philip's case, the pros definitely outweighed the cons. She reminded herself grimly that those women who had husbands around the same age would have a lot more time to enjoy with their husbands than she and Philip had. Perhaps it was time to grow up and take their marriage more seriously. Molly quickly typed a message to her husband. It read, "Change of plans, darling. I'll take out the trash first. Then I'll pack and catch the afternoon flight to New York. Tell the Four Seasons front desk staff that your wife will be joining you at this time." She closed the message with the same winking emoji he'd sent her. And after that, Philip drove the hot and lively Ferrari alone, and there were no speeding tickets. The end! Subscribe to my channel! Thank you!